Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the overwhelming world of business data, venture capital, and yes, even reality television, mash it all up, and give you the essential nuggets of knowledge you need to be seriously well-informed.
Today, we are strapping ourselves into the hot seat of entrepreneurial ambition, the hallowed floor of Shark Tank. This show has become, a real cultural institution.
It really has. It's approaching its 15th year on the air, which is kind of amazing. It premiered way back in 2009.
That longevity is astonishing. When you think about how fast reality TV shows come and go, a show about, capital and balance sheets lasting this long really says something.
It speaks to the American dream, doesn't it? That idea that anyone with a brilliant idea, regardless of their background, can potentially change their life in, 40 minutes?
Absolutely. As one of the original sharks quipped, he plans to die in that seat. He really believes the show is one of the clearest paths for people to achieve that dream. Yeah, he said every time a deal closes, he feels like he's changed someone's life, and that takes, in his words, a little bit of magic.
And we want to pull back the curtain on that magic.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today is pretty simple. We're here to unpack the reality behind that famous on-air handshake deal.
Right, that moment the cameras capture.
Exactly. We need to explore why less than half of those televised deals actually close when the lawyers get involved. And maybe most satisfyingly, we need to talk about the incredible, sometimes billion-dollar successes that the sharks just completely missed.
We've got a massive stack of source material here. Everything from hard data on startup failure rates to exclusive details straight from the show's executive producer and even Kevin O'Leary himself on the intense rules.
So we've got the insider's take.
We do. We've poured over deep case studies on the iconic successes and, of course, the memorable flops. We're looking for that fundamental wisdom that separates a good TV pitch from, a genuinely sustainable billion-dollar company.
Okay, so let's start with the central, really intriguing question that first drew us into this deep dive, because it reveals the show's incredible filtering power.
Let's do it.
We hear all the time that approximately 90% of all startups eventually fail. If that daunting statistic is true, how is it even possible statistically that only 6% of the companies that appear on Shark Tank have shut down?
That gap, that's the whole story right there. That comparison suggests the show isn't just a show. It's one of the most powerful, if brutal, vetting mechanisms in the business world.
It pre-screens them.
It pre-screens for marketability, for founder drive, for proven early sales, things that traditional venture capital often can't see as clearly. We really need to understand what that process filters for before we even look at the deals themselves.
Right, so before we celebrate that tiny 6% failure rate, which frankly just feels impossible, we need to appreciate the real-world gauntlet every entrepreneur faces. This is the context for the people pitching.
It is a stark reality check. When we talk about the overall failure rate, the figures are just astronomical. Roughly 90% of all startups will eventually fail.
90%.
But let's break that down because the early years are absolutely critical. 65% of all businesses fail within 10 years, and a really worrying 23% don't even make it past the first year.
So 1 in 5 businesses are gone in the first 12 months.
Gone. In the United States specifically, the overall startup failure rate is around 80%.
Just let those numbers sink in. It means if you get past that first year, you've already beaten nearly a quarter of the competition, but you're still fighting uphill.
A very steep hill. The data shows half of all new businesses are gone by year 5. Almost 70% are gone by year 10. It's an unforgiving climb, and that's before we even talk about massive headline-making success.
And that kind of success is statistically, a ghost.
Vanishingly small. We use the term unicorn for a company that hits $1 billion valuation, and companies have I have to read this slowly, a 0.0006% chance of earning that valuation.
That's practically zero.
It's effectively zero. Less than 1% of startups globally ever achieve that status. So basically, a typical startup has a 99% failure rate when it comes to hitting that $1 billion mark.
And most of them never get the fuel to even start the climb. We assume if you have a great idea, the funding just follows, but that's not true at all.
No, the reality is crushing. Only 0.05% of all startups get any kind of institutional investment capital.
That is a massive funding hurdle.
Huge. Think of it this way. A typical VC firm gets over 1,000 proposals a year. They're looking for hyper-growth, mostly investments of at least $250,000.
And even if you're one of those lucky few who gets the VC money,
failure is still the norm. 75% of venture-backed startups eventually fail. And crucially, 75% of those failures never even return the initial cash to the investors.
So why do they fail? What are the top pitfalls? It seems like it's less about bad execution and more about bad foresight.
You nailed it. The number one reason, according to research from Failery, is a lack of product market fit. That accounts for a massive 34% of all failures.
So they built something technically sound, but nobody actually wanted it or needed it.
Exactly. The product was a solution looking for a problem.
That's profound. It means the product itself is kind of irrelevant. If you can't convince people the problem you're solving is important. If you don't sell the problem first, you lose.
You lose. The other big factors are financial and marketing. A huge 82% of businesses that went under in 2023 did so because of cash flow problems.
So they might have had sales, but they couldn't manage their burn rate.
Right. And marketing problems are the second most common reason, sinking 29% of startups.
That high number for marketing suggests that a great product isn't enough. If your amazing product solves a universal problem, but nobody knows it exists, it's just a tree falling in an empty forest.
And that volatility varies wildly by industry, which is something the sharks have to calculate instantly. When a VC sees a crypto startup, for instance, they're not just seeing potential, they're seeing a sector with an extremely high failure rate of 95%.
And that huge risk is why the valuation bar is so much higher for those niches.
Precisely. It's the same for fintech companies. Despite all the rapid growth, 3 out of 4 will eventually fail.
But there are pockets of stability, right? I read the gaming industry, surprisingly, has the highest success rate, around 50%.
It does. Maybe because the barriers to entry for early development are lower and the user feedback loop is incredibly fast. You know if your game is a dud very quickly.
Which brings us back to the Shark Tank anomaly. If the general startup failure rate is 90%, and even the VC-backed rate is 75%, how in the world are we looking at only a 6% long-term failure rate for companies that were on the show?
That 6% suggests the casting process is, like you said, an incredibly powerful filter for resiliency, marketability, and probably most importantly, the founder's drive.
You have to look at the funnel. They vet between 35,000 to 40,000 applicants a season. Of those tens of thousands, they might film about 150 pitches.
And fewer than 100 actually make it to air.
So the air rate is a brutal 0.22%.
Right. If you make it onto the show, you are already in the top 99.78 percentile of vetted companies. The process weeds out poor product market fit, obvious financial disasters, and critically, founders who just lack that conviction or charisma. The business that makes it to the tank has already cleared hurdles that sink 90% of their peers.
Okay, so let's unpack that journey. What does it take for an entrepreneur to get through that 0.22% filter and even stand in front of a shark? It sounds like winning the lottery just to get on camera.
It's an incredibly intense, multi-stage vetting process. You can apply online, go to an open call, or sometimes a producer will contact you directly.
And if you pass that first look?
You have to submit a longer, detailed application and a casting video. But this is where the business criteria meet the demands of reality TV.
So the application's about business viability. But since it's a TV show, the producers have their own formula that goes beyond the balance sheet.
Absolutely. The executive producer, Clay Newbill, confirmed they look for 3 core things: drive and passion, a good backstory, and an innovative concept. He stresses that confidence is key because the sharks aren't just giving you money, they are partnering with you. They need someone coachable.
And compelling.
And compelling. And they deliberately overshoot to make sure they have enough good material. One season had 14,000 applicants, but they only filmed around 130 pitches.
Because they need 4 strong pitches per episode and can't risk running out of material if a pitch is boring or a deal falls apart.
It's all about keeping the TV show entertaining and that success rate high. Now, let's talk about the pitch itself, the performance. Entrepreneurs write their own pitches, though producers might give some advice.
And the number one rule from investors like Kevin O'Leary is clarity.
Clarity and concision. If you're rambling, you've lost the investor because you clearly don't know where your business is going.
And they had to bring their own props and everything.
Yeah, everything. Entrepreneurs provide their own props, sets, costumes. The producers greenlight it, but the whole physical setup is on the founder.
I heard they once had live scorpions and roaches on set.
They did. It has to fit the product. The main rule is simple. If it doesn't fit on stage or isn't safe, you can't bring it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for anyone who only sees the 10-minute segment, the time warp.
Yes. The initial rehearsed pitch is supposed to be short, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, but that's just the opener.
The average pitch, including the Q&A, lasts for about 40 minutes.
About 40 minutes. The shortest was under 22 minutes, and the longest stretched to 2 hours.
And they edit that all the way down to 7 to 12 minutes for the screen.
They do. The long process is because of the Q&A. These are millionaires deciding to invest their own money, so they get thorough. They want to dissect your supply chain, your margins, your ability to scale.
And this leads to a key difference between Shark Tank and traditional VC. The sharks hear the pitch for the first time live, on camera, no prior research.
That element of surprise is non-negotiable. If the sharks knew what was coming, their teams would do deep research beforehand, and the whole conversation would feel scripted. This way, the viewers are learning right along with the sharks.
And the pressure must be insane, because there are no redos. It's one and done.
The camera never stops rolling. The producer said it's extremely rare for filming to stop. That is a high-stakes performance.
All of this high pressure leads to the most important reality check for the viewer at home. The handshake is absolutely not a check.
Not even close. Shark Tank is a business show, not a game show. The handshake is purely a gentleman's agreement. It's the beginning of the relationship, not the transfer of funds.
So for the entrepreneur celebrating on camera, it means the real work, the due diligence period, is just beginning.
Exactly. Both parties enter this deep phase of digging, checking everything in the presentation, especially those exaggerated sales forecasts.
Those hockey stick projections on sales, the fantasy charts where sales are flat and then suddenly shoot straight up.
Due diligence is designed to find the gap between that fantasy and the real, verified balance sheet.
And this is where most deals crumble. Less than 50% of the deals we see on air actually close in real life. That's a huge attrition rate.
It is. One shark estimates 20% of handshake deals are never executed. But get this. Another believes that 90% of the withdrawals actually come from the entrepreneur.
90% from the entrepreneur. So they're just on the show for the publicity.
That's the theory. They're there for the Shark Tank effect. Once they get that massive exposure, they walk away to pursue better terms from outside investors who are watching.
Wait, if that's true, isn't that a failure of the producer's vetting process?
Or it proves the marketing benefit alone is so valuable that founders are willing to gamble on a bad deal just to get on air. The exposure is guaranteed, the deal closing is not.
And even if the deal does close, the terms can still change.
Oh yeah. If the numbers don't match what was said in the pitch, the shark revises the offer, and the entrepreneur can back out if the new terms don't work.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the critical, non-negotiable post-tank rules. First, you can't pitch the sharks outside the show. No sliding into DMs.
Nope, that preserves the element of surprise. And second, they are sworn to absolute secrecy. You can't tell anyone, not your family, not your spouse, that you're appearing on the show until ABC releases the air date.
Which is only about 3 weeks before it airs. That must be incredibly stressful.
It is. And recognizing that psychological toll, all entrepreneurs are offered a meeting with the show's psychologist after their pitch.
That's actually standard for reality TV, but it just underscores how high the stakes really are.
Moving from the rules to the results, let's analyze what the experts actually demand in that 40-minute window. We have insights from both the executive producer, who's looking for a compelling founder, and the investors, who are just focused on the bottom line.
Let's start with Clay Newbill, the producer. He laid out 6 keys to selling your idea. The first is relentless belief. If the founder doesn't believe in the vision, why should anyone else?
And second, there must be focus to maximize clarity. You have to simplify the explanation. His core advice is critical. Demonstrate the problem first, then present your solution. The test is simple. Does it solve a real problem for the average person at home?
That's the difference between a novelty and a necessity. If you're solving a problem for 10 people, they lose interest. If it's for millions, the valuation spikes.
His third key is fundamental, but often overlooked: practice. You need to know that pitch frontward and backward. That prep ensures you don't panic under the intense questioning about, your code GS or your distribution strategy.
And finally, Newbill advises perseverance. You have to be thick-skinned. Rejection, especially from a shark on national TV, is a fantastic opportunity to learn and grow.
Now let's contrast that with the pure, cold reality of the investor's perspective, specifically Kevin O'Leary's demands. He starts with the same mandate: no rambling. If you're unclear, he's out.
He also looks for the X factor, that one thing that de-risks the investment, whether it's a patent or massive early sales. And of course, the most essential rule: know your numbers, tell the truth, and be ready to defend every single financial fact.
Exactly. But it's fascinating to see the difference in priorities. While New Bill lists a great backstory as a top element for the producers because it makes good out of it, TV O'Leary is blunt about it.
What's his take?
He says he cares more about proven executional skills than the backstory. He doesn't care about your dog's name. He wants to see evidence you've successfully executed on a plan before.
That dynamic, the tension between the TV narrative and the rational business metrics, is what makes the show work. Let's bring in the founder's perspective from Dawn Myers.
Her advice is so grounded in that reality. She says you have to remember the casting team are TV producers first, not VCs. You need the business fundamentals, but you have to tell a compelling story.
You have to give them something that will grab eyeballs. Put on a show, whether you get a deal or not. Give them the sob story or the heroic story arc.
Yes, and that focus on the behind the scenes extends to how you treat everyone. She stresses respecting the entire team producers, legal staff, makeup artists, because their impression of you can travel. They are the gatekeepers to your airtime.
And finally, she highlights that deep preparation is the edge. Understand the layout and timing of the day so you can pivot on a dime and insert that extra razzle-dazzle without seeming flustered.
Okay, so we established that only 6% of Shark Tank companies shut down, which is incredible. But the failures that happen after the handshake are often spectacular and really instructive.
They teach us that a shared passion in the tank is no substitute for solid legal structure or basic product compliance.
The quintessential nightmare investment story has to be Breathometer. This one got $1 million from all 5 sharks for a portable breathalyzer.
I remember that. The unity of the sharks made it seem like a guaranteed blockbuster.
But the business ran into massive fundamental problems. First, accuracy issues. The device did not reliably measure blood alcohol content. Second, they couldn't fulfill the massive orders they got post-show. And then
The feds got involved.
the Federal Trade Commission got involved and required the company to issue customer refunds.
That's a colossal failure.
It was. It was later joked that the only thing Breathometer reliably measured was investor regret. It was a complete disaster, and the company is now trying to pivot to an oral hygiene product. The original investment is gone.
Then you have the failure that proves investors are buying the team just as much as the product. Sweet balls.
Right. They secured a $250,000 deal with Cuban and Corcoran for their cake balls and got into 7-Eleven almost immediately.
But the internal dynamics were toxic.
A messy legal feud and a falling out between the co-founders caused the company's momentum to just melt down right at the height of its popularity. It's a lesson that even massive market traction can't overcome a fractured partnership.
And what about Body Jag from season 1, the push-up assistance device?
It secured a deal from Corcoran and Harrington. Corcoran even conditioned the deal on the founder losing weight with the device, which he did.
But the product just failed to sell.
It just didn't gain traction. Corcoran later publicly called it her worst investment on the show. It proves a great founder story isn't enough if the product doesn't resonate long term.
We also see deals crumble because of post-show disagreements, like Show No Towels, the kids' towel. Lori Greiner made a deal, but it fell apart.
Yeah, the founder claimed Lori tried to change the offer substantially after the show, demanding up to 70% equity or changing it to a restrictive loan. It shows how crucial that founder-investor chemistry is and how fragile the handshake can be.
And we can't forget the quick digital flops like Katie.
The app for cheaters.
Right. Kevin O'Leary and Damon John invested $70,000.
And it failed rapidly. It was glitchy, it was limited to Android users, and it struggled with terrible user reviews. It just faded away completely after 2013, proving a great idea needs flawless execution.
These are bad failures, but they pale in comparison to the real world's most expensive flop. Quibi.
Oh man, the video subscription service that got $1.75 billion in funding and failed in less than 8 months. It really puts the scale of risk into harsh perspective. A Shark Tank failure might cost a shark $1 million. Quibi cost billions.
Speaking of deals that never even closed, the due diligence process saved Cuban from a few bad ones, like Foot Fairy.
An iPad app for measuring children's feet. Mark Cuban offered a $100,000 deal, but it fell through.
Why?
The app was buggy, and crucially, it failed to reliably capture commission payments, which was its whole business model. Diligence showed there was no viable path to income, so the deal was off. The company closed within 6 months.
And then there's Hycon, the fire hose nozzle. Cuban offered $1.25 million for 100% of the company.
But the founder, Jeff Stroop, pulled out.
He pulled out because Cuban tried to change the deal from a full acquisition to a licensing agreement, and the founder feared he'd lose control. He prioritized control over the massive payday.
Finally, we have to touch on the pitches that were so ridiculous they really show the balance between business and pure entertainment.
Like the Sullivan generator.
The guy who claimed his machine could generate electricity by harnessing the Earth's spin and produce gold as a byproduct.
And Kevin O'Leary asked him, "How long are you visiting Earth?"
And Cuban said his BS meter was through the roof. It was rejected instantly.
And the downright creepy ones, like the ionic ear, a surgically implanted Bluetooth device that needed a needle for nightly charging.
Rejected immediately. Or the no phone, a fake plastic phone for smartphone addiction, rejected for having zero utility.
We can't forget the safety hazards, like wake-in bacon.
The pig-shaped alarm clock that cooked bacon while you slept. They rejected it instantly for the obvious fire hazard of leaving raw meat next to a heating element overnight. It makes you wonder what the producers were thinking.
I think we know it's the spectacle.
Yep.
But it does show the sharks are disciplined about rejecting concepts that are fundamentally unsafe or based on pseudoscience.
Now we get to the most fascinating stories, the ones that prove the sharks are brilliant, but they're not infallible. These are the pitches that became multi-million and even billion-dollar companies.
But first, let's start with the immense value of just appearing on the show, even without a deal. The Shark Tank effect. This is often why entrepreneurs pull out of those handshake deals later.
The Shark Tank effect is absolutely real and powerful. Simply appearing on the show can significantly boost sales. Some entrepreneurs have reported immediate 10 to 20-fold increases in daily revenues after their episode airs.
That free national marketing provides immediate validation and traffic, which often leads to better deals from outside investors.
Exactly. Our first major case study is the billion-dollar blunder. Ring, originally called Doorbot. Founder Jamie Siminoff pitched his smart doorbell in 2013, seeking $700,000 for 10% equity, valuing the company at $7 million.
The margins were healthy, but the sharks balked at the valuation. They couldn't see the future ecosystem. They saw it as just another consumer hardware gadget.
Kevin O'Leary was the only one to make an offer, but it was structured as a loan with a complicated royalty. He offered $700,000 with a 10% royalty that dropped to 7%, plus 5% equity.
Let's unpack that. It was basically a debt deal wrapped in equity, ensuring a guaranteed return for O'Leary no matter what.
And Siminoff rejected it. He argued, correctly, that the royalty structure would perpetually bleed the company of the cash it needed to scale.
And that decision paid off.
Immensely. Doorbot became Ring, got funding from Richard Branson and Goldman Sachs, and was eventually acquired by Amazon in 2018 for over $1 billion.
The irony is just that single miss was higher than the total valuation of all companies the sharks had collectively invested in over 10 seasons.
They completely missed the broader security ecosystem the product would occupy.
Our second major case study, Kodiak Cakes, the whole grain flapjack mix. The founders asked for $500,000 for 10%, valuing the company at $5 million. They already had $3.5 million in sales.
They were pitching a profitable scaling business, but the sharks just saw a crowded shelf. Kevin O'Leary argued the business was only worth $2 million and feared competitors like Bisquick would stamp out the brand. He offered $500,000 for 50%.
Half the company.
Half the company. The founders walked away. The investor error here was classic. They underestimated a major shift in consumer preferences. Kodiak Cakes wasn't just pancake mix. It was perfectly positioned for the demand for high-protein, convenient foods.
And post-show, they launched their protein power cakes line, and sales exploded.
Sales tripled to $16 million by 2016, and the company was valued at $300 million by 2022. They validated their decision to walk away from that 50% equity demand 100 times over.
The misses just keep piling up. Take the Books Company, the farm-to-table floral delivery service. They were rejected on air due to logistics concerns.
Right, but the founder later secured funding from Robert Herjavec off-camera. The business bloomed into an estimated $597 million valuation, proving the initial doubts were just wrong. Sometimes a shark just needs to see it work a little longer.
And then there's the ultimate rejection of a massive offer. Coffee meets bagel.
The dating app founders rejected Mark Cuban's offer to buy the entire business for $30 million, the largest offer in the show's history at the time.
They weren't looking for a buyout. They were looking for a partner.
And they grew the business independently, later raising over $23 million, achieving an estimated $116 million valuation. They proved that holding out for a better path is sometimes worth rejecting a life-changing buyout.
Even simple ideas the sharks missed, like stop the thing that stops items from falling between car seats, racked up over $24 million in sales. Lori Greiner invested, but the other sharks passed.
It just shows that the simplest solution to a common problem can generate colossal success.
So what is this entire journey from the 90% failure rate of the startup world to the 6% resilience of the tank companies? What does it all mean for you, the aspiring founder or just the curious student of business?
The Shark Tank ecosystem highlights a crucial paradox. On one hand, the show's incredibly low 6% failure rate proves the screening process is powerfully effective. It filters out companies that lack basic market demand or founder drive. If you make it to the tank, your business is already in a league of its own.
But on the other hand, the huge Mrs. Ring Kodiak cake show that even expert titans with decades of experience can completely misjudge market shifts, new categories, and, most importantly, founder conviction.
They can get trapped by what they've seen work in the past and fail to recognize a billion-dollar innovation right in front of them.
So the real value for entrepreneurs might not even be the investment, but the unparalleled exposure and validation. The Shark Tank effect.
That often leads to accelerated growth or better deals from outside investors who saw the pitch and knew the terms offered by the sharks were just too restrictive.
And this brings us to our final provocative thought. The most successful rejected founders, like Ring's Jamie Siminoff and Kodiak Cake's Joel Clark, they succeeded because they had the self-awareness and the resolve to reject a bad deal.
They walked away from millions of dollars on the table. They prioritized the long-term vision and the cash needed for scaling over that short-term expediency.
They understood that accepting a deal that bleeds the company through high royalties or gives away too much equity too early might actually be more detrimental than walking away with nothing.
So when you are pursuing your dream, whether you're dealing with a VC or a business partner, you have to ask yourself this question, just like the billion-dollar rejects did. Are you optimizing for the deal, the headline number, the handshake, the immediate validation?
Or are you optimizing for the long-term application and health of your underlying idea? That decision, more than any shark's check, determines the ultimate outcome.